Once upon a time in a land that definitely isn't Australia, a kindly scientist called Dr. Neo Cortex created an adorable animal-human hybrid for reasons that had absolutely nothing to do with world domination. This is a very bad explanation of the plot of one of the most popular video games of the 1990s and beyond, by the way, the one and only Crash Bandicoot. Following the success of their fighting game, Way of the Warrior, developer Naughty Dog was compelled by Universal Interactive Studios to create 3 more games. After deciding they wanted to make a 3D platformer similar to Mario and Donkey Kong, the company came up with everyone's favourite marauding marsupial, and the rest, as they say, is history.
The Crash Bandicoot series has seen the highest of highs and the lowest of lows, from its days as the unofficial representative of the original PlayStation, to years spent languishing in obscurity, to its triumphant return in the 2010s. We've seen the main character branch out into kart racing, party games and beat-em-ups, make dozens of weird and wonderful friends, and appear on practically every gaming system worth its salt over the last 3 decades. But which of his adventures are hotter than 1,000 TNT crates, and which ones stink like rotting Wumpa fruit? For our rankings, we've consulted the critical scores, sales figures, and fan opinions for every single one of Crash's games, and occasionally sprinkled our own thoughts in to add a little extra flavour. We're only counting games where Crash is the main attraction though, so you won't see any Skylanders here, nor will we be reviewing the ability to play a tiny part of the original game in Uncharted 4, although that was pretty awesome. Number 1, right? Number 1?
I hope you've got your own Aku mask for protection, because this is going to be one hell of a ride. Let's rank 'em. I'm Ben.
And I'm Peter from Gaming Ranked, and this is every Crash Bandicoot video game ranked from worst to best.
The Unrankables. Crash Bandicoot. 2003. Mobile. Before you get your knickers or boxer briefs in a twist, there is no need to panic. This is not the much-cherished starting point of the series that revolutionized 3D platforming for the PlayStation 1. We won't be getting to that until way later in the countdown. Instead, this is Crash's first foray into the land of mobile gaming, which happened in 2003 under the watchful eye of developers Link. In terms of story, there really isn't a lot to say, as the in-game summary of the plot simply reads, "Collect all the crystals to prevent Dr. Neo Cortex dominating the world." That's it. That's all the explanation we're getting. This is an outrage. I'm going to write to Link about this. Actually, they've probably got better things to do, so never mind. The gameplay is also mind-numbingly simple, as players use their phone keys to move Crash left or right, jump up and down, and do a spin attack, if they can actually work out how to do that, which is unlikely. The core objectives of the main series, such as breaking crates, avoiding TNT, and gathering Wumpa fruit for extra lives, are also present, but on a significantly stripped-down level. If they were a person, they wouldn't just be naked, but they'd be skinless too. Enjoy that image. In a turn of events that will shock absolutely no one, footage of this relic is quite difficult to come by, with one video and a few still images surfacing online if you manage to use the right combination of words in your search engine. This is probably the best thing that could have happened to this game, as if more people were able to find it, more people would be disappointed. The one review we could find pointed out that most of the gameplay comes down to how well players can jump, and whilst jumping is great and all, easily one of my favourite things to do with my legs, it's not what players were after in a Crash game. The Unrankables. Crash Twinsanity. 2004. Mobile. Once again, this is not the console version of the game named Crash Twinsanity. It's another mobile game that just so happens to be called the exact same thing. Similarly, we will be hearing from the real Twinsanity further on in the list, although that may be sooner than the PS1 version of Crash Bandicoot. Spoilers. Also known as Twinsanity 2D in certain circles for reasons that will become apparent later, this curio from 2004 follows a bare-bones version of the main game's plot, which sees Crash and his longtime foe Neo Cortex forced to team up to take on some baddies called the Evil Twins. And before you ask, no, they are not the creepy twins from The Shining, although that would have been amazing. Like in the console release, players need to master the Dock Amuck mechanic, which involves Crash running along a high platform, pressing switches and pulling levers to open doors for Cortex to progress through on a similar path parallel to him. There are 6 levels to complete, with a gem reward at the end of each one, all leading to a text screen at the end saying that the game is over. Far from the most satisfying conclusion to an adventure ever, but them's the facts. Considering that your average mobile phone in 2004 had the same processing power as a modern-day electric toothbrush, the few reviews we could find for Twinsanity 2D were quite positive. The graphics were praised, as was the gameplay, even though that just boiled down to running around and pushing some buttons. One reviewer even said that they enjoyed it more than the console version, which is a bit hard to believe, but again, them's the facts. Sadly, there simply weren't enough reputable sources to pull from to earn Twinsanity 2D an honest place on our list, so its charms will just have to remain a secret for those who enjoyed them at the time. The Unrankables, Crash Twinsanity 3D, 2005, Mobile. The reason why the last game is known colloquially as Twinsanity 2D is because just 1 year later, a different mobile game was released called Twinsanity 3D. Oh, sorry to keep you in suspense for so long, but you know we live for the drama. Released to coincide with the launch of Vodafone Live, a multimedia portal service launched by the phone provider that existed between 2002 and 2009. Hey, is that David Beckham? Twinsanity 3D is a version of the console game in name only, as it shares almost nothing with its bigger sibling. Whilst the evil twins do feature as the primary antagonists, they do so only in cutscenes, berating Crash and Cortex and monologuing about their vague, world-conquering plans. As for the actual gameplay, instead of helping your enemy-turned friend navigate obstacles, all there is to do is run, and run, and run, and run. Crash starts off each level at the beginning of a long and windy road, which he must traverse, picking up Wumpas and avoiding TNT crates all the while. Thank goodness that Twinsanity 3D didn't get enough professional reviews to be a legitimate entry, because it surely would have been slaughtered. The one bit of coverage we did manage to track down admired the game's attempt to jump on the craze of viewed from behind races that were popular on mobiles at the time, but decried its poor control scheme and unflattering graphics. Basically, if you wanted to bore yourself while staring at a badly animated Bandicoot bottom, then this was the game for you, but for everyone else, it was to be avoided at all costs. Ah, phew. Well, with the Unrankables out of the way, let's move on to the list proper. Number 28. Crash Boom Bang, 2006, Nintendo DS. Despite the fact that his name is a synonym for a loud noise, Crash Bandicoot has only appeared in 2 games with an exclamation mark in the title. If I were in charge, you can bet there'd be way more punctuation, especially in Terrabangs. Those things are great. One of these titles is the 2006 DS exclusive Crash Boom Bang. This was the first game in the series for the dual-screened handheld and is a collection of minigames designed to be played in a group. The plot revolves around a corrupt millionaire searching for a large diamond which is creatively called the Super Big Power Crystal. But this is just a framing device to give some sense of structure to the party format. Like in Mario Party, players choose from one of 8 playable characters and then move around a big board by rolling dice. The squares they land on are either good or bad, and the objective is to win as much Wumpa fruit as possible before reaching the end. This sounds rather simple and, quite frankly, impossible to get wrong, but you'd better believe they've found a way to muck it all up. The minigames in Crash Boom Bang are boring at best and completely unplayable at worst. The control scheme is entirely flawed, the computer-controlled characters never do what they're supposed to, and some of the games glitch out and cause the touchscreen to freeze, which completely defeats the point of it even being on the DS in the first place. To see a once-beloved mascot fall to such lows hit a lot of gamers hard, with many quick to call this Crash's worst outing yet, and in some cases, one of the worst DS titles full stop. Its name might sound explosive, but Crash Boom Bang ended up being little more than a whimper. Number 27. Crash Mind Over Mutant, 2008, DS. Just 2 years after the Crash Boom Bang debacle on DS, Crash returned to the system with a game that was better. Please note that we said better and not good, because Crash Mind Over Mutant was still a complete flop. The game was also released on consoles and developed by Radical Entertainment, but this version, which was made by toes and presumably also by fingers, is completely different. We did think about lumping the PSP release in here too, but that was a direct port of the one for PS2, so we decided to leave it off. Although, based on the few reviews we could find for that particular version, I don't think it would have helped this one's case all that much. After being foiled in the previous game, Dr. Neo Cortex and his new pal Nitrous Brio build a smartphone-like device designed to control people's minds and force them to do their bidding. Crash and Aku Aku are immune to the device, possibly because they don't have minds, but who am I to say? And must stop the devious duo before it's too late. If you couldn't already tell, Mind Over Mutant has a lot to say about what modern life was like at the time. It's full of low-level satire, poking fun at technology, consumerism, and even the price of petrol. I'm sure the developers found all this hilarious, but I'm not sure how many of the kids playing this game got all the jokes about 4x4s. Unlike the other versions, this one on DS is a 2D side-scrolling beat-em-up as opposed to a more free-roaming experience. This isn't always a bad thing. Just ask any Streets of Rage fan, but that game is good, whereas this one is stuffed full of boring, monotonous levels that are a far cry from those players got in Crash's heyday. Low frame rates, poor graphics, sparse enemy placement, and a lack of audio quality were among the other complaints leveled at this version of the game by players who all felt like they'd been made fools of for not buying it on console. Number 26. Crash Bandicoot On the Run. 2021. Mobile. After our marsupial friend returned to the public eye in a big way in 2017, more on that much later, it sparked a bit of a resurgence for the character, resulting in more Crash games than fans had seen in a very long time. Whilst some were good, others were, well, they were stupid mobile games. On the Run, the other Crash game to feature an exclamation mark, by the way, was released in 2021. Actually, that's a half-truth. It was released worldwide in 2021 after it was soft-launched in Malaysia the year before. Quite what Malaysia did to get subjected to this sort of abuse for an entire year before anyone else, we don't know, but it must have been bad. In the style of Temple Run or Subway Surfers, On the Run is an endless runner where the objective is to cover as much ground as possible, playing as either Crash or Coco whilst collecting Wumpa fruit. Some elements from the main series made it across, such as the use of Aku Aku as a shield, but for the most part it's essentially identical to every other endless runner game that your little cousins have begged you to let them play on your phone. Developer King tried their best to add some variety to the formula by including boss battles at the end of each stage, but that wasn't enough to prevent On the Run from being tarred with the dull and repetitive brush like so many of its contemporaries. Can you really blame players for feeling this way? Most of the time spent playing this game is swiping your finger either up or down or side to side, which is both bad for your joints and, more importantly, bad for your soul. This is a classic case of a game being hampered by its own premise, as there wasn't much that could really be done to make it fun. Still, they didn't have to make it in the first place, did they? Number 25. Crash Bandicoot Purple Ripto's Rampage. 2004. Game Boy Advance. Dedicated fans of 90s platformers should recognize that the Ripto in the name of this game from 2004 is actually a villain in the Spyro the Dragon series. What is this? A crossover episode? Yes, it is actually, yeah. The Cuddly Lizard and the Twirly Mammal got together for two near-identical Game Boy Advance titles set in each other's worlds, Spyro Orange, the Cortex Conspiracy, and Crash Bandicoot Purple, Ripto's Rampage, or Spyro Fusion and Crash Bandicoot Fusion if you want to get European about this. Series enemies Neo Cortex and Ripto the Warlock team up to build mechanical versions of one another's foes, leading each to believe that the other is evil. They quickly shake this off though, and our heroes join forces to batter the baddies once and for all. Well, until the next game at least. Seeing how both Crash and Spyro are icons of the same era of gaming, you'd think a title featuring both of them together would be one of the greatest things to ever happen. Unfortunately, the exact opposite is true. Ripto's Rampage simply isn't great. This is yet another example of Crash being dumped onto a handheld with no thought at all given to the design, a crime against a series that once boasted some of the most fun levels in the gaming world. The gameplay, which revolved around platforming and a collection of mini-games, got super repetitive super quickly, and whilst Ripto's Rampage definitely reviewed better than the Cortex Conspiracy, both felt like cheap throwaways as opposed to a collaboration between two titans of their genre. It'd be like if Freddy Krueger and Jason Voorhees were in a film together and it ended up being rubbish. Wait, this actually happened, and it was rubbish! Crikey, what was the likelihood of that? Number 24. Crash Bandicoot The Wrath of Cortex. 2001. PS2, Xbox, and GameCube. For the first 5 years of its lifespan, the Crash series was a PlayStation exclusive, something for owners of the Sony console to lord over their Xbox and Nintendo-loving friends. That all changed in 2001 with the arrival of The Wrath of Cortex, the first time the franchise was allowed on other systems. After initially launching on PlayStation in October of 2001, The Wrath of Cortex was ported to Xbox the following April and then to GameCube in September. We maybe should have counted the GameCube version separately as it was developed by Eurocom as opposed to Traveller's Tales, but since the review scores were all in a similar ballpark, we decided not to bother. The nefarious Uka Uka tasks Neo Cortex and his various goons with kidnapping the Elementals, a group of powerful masks that he intends to use as a power source for his new super weapon. And what might that weapon be, I hear you ask? Well, a bigger, augmented version of Crash. You know what they say, if you can't beat 'em, build a jacked version that looks like 'em. Sadly for Crunch, he is not this game's only legacy, as it's mostly remembered for being the first bad mainline Crash installment. After 3 years of innovation upon innovation, Roth felt like a carbon copy of Crash 3, and a bad one at that. Both Crash and Coco are less fun to play as, and due to an abundance of fixed camera angles, players can expect to regularly find themselves unable to see a puzzle solution, and as a consequence, are forced to die over and over again before they're finally able to pass. Some absolutely criminal load times in the PS2 version and bad Game Boy connectivity for the GameCube sealed the wrath of Cortex's fate. Not even a genetically altered Bandicoot could save it now. Number 23. Crash Tag Team Racing, 2005, PS2, Xbox, and GameCube. He may have first earned his fame as a platforming bigwig, but there's a whole other side to Crash that doesn't involve leaping on crates and beating the local wildlife to death. Welcome to the wonderful world of Crash Kart Racers. Actually, this one isn't so wonderful, but it gets better, I promise. The third game in this sub-series, Crash Tag Team Racing, debuted in 2005 for an array of home consoles and on a singular handheld device that we'll talk about later. The lovable goodies and their relentless pursuers stumble across an old racing-themed amusement park that is running out of power due to the theft of a set of magical crystals. The park's owner offers to hand over the deeds to whoever can track down the missing gems, which sets in motion the game's events. Oh, and there's the small matter of the owner's cyborg bodysuit, which is also powering down and will kill him if the crystals aren't returned in time. Bloody hell, that's a bit dark for a kart racer, isn't it? In a twist, they definitely didn't steal from a certain plumber. The vehicles in tag team racing can carry 2 different races, a first for the series. There are also mini challenges to complete, areas of the park to explore, and a set of unlockables called dioramas, where you can watch Crash perish in amusing ways. Seriously, why is this game so obsessed with death? The presence of the Grim Reaper may have put off some reviewers who are not happy with the game overall. Many criticised how few drivers and weapons there were, and begrudged the fact that a racing game included so many fetch quests, which is entirely fair. It wasn't even like the actual racing was that good either, as very few of the tracks lived long in the memories of players. Now, can somebody please check on the cyborg man? Just give him a poke with a stick or something? Oh, thank God. Number 22. Crash of the Titans, 2007, PS2, Xbox 360, and Wii. If you've ever wanted to know what the inhabitants of the Crash Bandicoot universe look like on drugs, then boy oh boy do we have the game for you. Released in 2007 as the 6th main entry in the franchise, Crash of the Titans begins with Crash and Coco working on a machine to recycle leftover butter. Don't ask, just don't. Their day is disrupted when Neo Cortex and Uka Uka arrive, kidnap Coco, and reveal their plan to use a substance called Mojo to create an army of jacked up super mutants named Titans. Oh, so that's why the game's called Crash of the Titans. Clever. The platforming that had dominated so many of the older Crash games got replaced by a more beat-em-up style of play, courtesy of a new mechanic called jacking. Why are you laughing? Jacking, of course, is a method of taking control of Titans and using them to attack other enemies. Honestly, you lot are filthy. This new mechanic is easily one of the best things about the game, along with its improved graphics and solid sense of humour, but that is about where the compliments stop. Mindlessly stomping enemies into the ground gets old after a while, especially as Crash fans were used to solving more complex puzzles and completing more varied levels as part of their gameplay experience. Co-op mode is fun if you can find someone to complete the story with, but the same cannot be said for the game's multiplayer, and once again, the camera is so rigid that a hurricane couldn't have shifted it. What is it with these middle-era Crash games and not letting players see things? Crash of the Titans continued a trend of poor main entries in the series, as the halcyon days of the original trilogy kept drifting further and further away. Please come back. We'll do anything you ask. Number 21. Crash Mind Over Mutant, 2008, PS2, Xbox 360, and Wii. Speaking of disappointing Crash entries on home console, Crash Mind Over Mutant was so bad that it killed Crash on consoles for nearly 10 years. Okay, there were other factors at play, but it's more fun to blame the game. The plot was largely the same as it was on handheld. The bad guys create a special device that brainwashes the inhabitants of Wumpa Islands, and it's up to our furry friend to put things right. Crash's journey takes him all over, from the jungle to outer space to an evil school. Why not? One of the most unique things about this game is that several individual cutscenes are animated in different styles, creating a range of visuals from simple South Park-style designs to more elaborate hand-drawn effects. This is a fantastic touch that showed just how much work had gone into making this game, which is why it's such a shame that the rest of it is so lackluster. Those pesky camera problems were back once again, and some critics wrote that the game was rendered nearly unplayable by its lack of mobility getting in the way of the platforming. Even when players could see what was going on, they weren't impressed, as outside of the special cutscenes, the rest of the graphics were substandard compared to what else was available at the time. The humour and story came in for some praise, as did the voice acting, which never got repetitive thanks to the team recording over 8,500 different lines of dialogue, but this wasn't enough to overcome all the problems we've just mentioned. The game just wasn't fun to play, which we would consider a rather major fault. Mind Over Mutant might have performed better on consoles than it did on DS, but at the end of the day, a glittery plops is still a plops. Number 20. Crash Bash 2000. PlayStation. As a new millennium dawned, those in charge of the Crash franchise decided it was time for the character to go in a bold new direction, which turned out to be nicking another idea that Mario did 2 years earlier. This was Crash Bash, a PlayStation exclusive title that served as the Bandicoot's first attempt at a party game. It was developed by Eurocom, making this the first time Crash had been taken out of the hands of Naughty Dog, and the core concept was very simple. Control a character, take part in some mini-games, rinse and repeat. Repeat, and repeat, and repeat, because in order to unlock new minigames, you had to play it on your own. A lot. A number of fan-favourite characters made appearances, including Crash and Coco, supporting villains like Dingo Dial and Tiny Tiger, and a brand new character called Rilla-Roo, who was so popular he didn't appear in another game for nearly 2 decades. The different tasks range from knocking opponents out of an area whilst riding polar bears, colouring in squares on a board using pogo sticks, and shooting each other with tanks. Sounds like fun, right? Well, it was, but it wasn't anything anyone hadn't seen before. The comparisons to Mario Party really did this game in, as it simply wasn't as good as that party game changer. There wasn't nearly as much variety in Bash as there was in the Mustache Man's game, and the whole thing felt like Eurocom had copied Nintendo's homework whilst squinting. Crash Bash being so low on the list will undoubtedly upset some people who have fond childhood memories of it, but ask yourself this. Was it the game you were enjoying? Or just the fact that you had loads of your friends around to play PlayStation at the same time? Well, we hope you had friends around anyway. The idea of someone playing a party game on their own makes us very sad, even though the game forces you to do it to unlock extra stages. Number 19. Crash Tag Team Racing 2005. PSP. In a pleasant turn of events, Crash Tag Team Racing actually scored higher on handhelds than it did on more powerful hardware. The handheld and home console versions do share one similarity though, they're both a bit pants. As we talked about a while ago, this is the third time Crash et al. Got to rev up their engines and go on a joyride, and this one's story is held together by a collapsing theme park and a man whose robot suit is running out of power. Unlike in many other kart races, tag team racing players need to complete platforming sections to unlock new stages, and vehicular combat elements were introduced by way of the clash mechanic, which allows drivers to merge their vehicles to create a supercart with a massive gun on the back. Sounds a bit Mad Max when you think about it, and when you consider Mad Max is from Australia just like Crash, well, one has to wonder if we've stumbled onto some super secret hidden Mad Max Crash Bandicoot shared universe. Probably not. The PSP version of Tag Team Racing included an exclusive co-op race where players remained joined together the whole way round the course. This is a sweet little bonus for Sony handheld owners, and partly made up for the fact that they had to put up with decreased graphical quality and a reduced soundtrack. Perhaps it was down to the extra co-op mode or simply because kart races are just more fun when you're holding them in your hands, but critics gave the PSP release the slight edge over its beefier brothers and sisters. The key word in that sentence was slight, as it still didn't review massively well, with long, clunky loading screens being a common issue for many wannabe racers. Now, if you'll excuse us, we need to get back to our Max Bandicoot crossover idea before one of you steals it from us. Number 18. Crash Team Rumble, 2023. PS5, PS4, Xbox One, and Xbox Series. At the time of writing, Crash Team Rumble is the most recent game to star everyone's favourite Paramelesgony. What? You don't know the Latin name for the Eastern Barred Bandicoot, and you call yourself a Crash fan? Pah! Pah! I say, I definitely pronounced it wrong. Developed by Toys for Bob, the brains behind the Sane Trilogy, Crash Team Rumble is the third-party game on our list, although it's very different to the minigame-focused gameplay of Boom Bang and Bash. This time, players go online to form teams and explore a range of environments, collecting Wumpa fruits and stopping their opponents from doing the same. The objective is to get as many of the magical apples as possible within a certain time limit. Easy peasy, Wumpa squumpa. There are 13 main characters to choose from, including some from the Spyro franchise, and they can be split into 3 groups based on certain attributes. Scorers collect the fruit, blockers defend the team's stash, and boosters collect power-ups for the whole team to use. Naturally, we believe they should have also included the class of Wailer, the person who sits in the corner and cries until all the fighting stops. That'll be us. Players loved how unique each character felt to play, but were disappointed with the lack of diversity in how the game could be played. There was also much discussion about the $30 price point, $40 if you wanted the deluxe edition, for a game that felt like it very much should have been free to play. It's safe to say that Rumble was not the hot follow-up to Crash 4 that many fans had been expecting, but at least the core gameplay was fun, even if it was literally the only thing there was to do. Number 17. Crash Twinsanity, 2004, PS2 and Xbox. For the 11th overall game in the Crash series, developer Traveller's Tales initially wanted to make a more serious game called Crash Bandicoot Evolution, but were put off when they discovered that their plans were too similar to the upcoming Ratchet & Clank. The end result of all this was Twinsanity, released for the PlayStation 2 and Xbox in 2004. After years of trying to mutilate each other, this time Crash and Neo Cortex need to team up to stop an even bigger threat: a pair of interdimensional parrots called the Evil Twins. It seems TT decided to wholly abandon the serious thing. There were some aspects to like about Twinsanity, not least that you got to play as both the hero and the villain of the series, which delighted long-term fans. Unfortunately, this one little gimmick wasn't enough to save the rest of the game from being painfully mediocre. It would genuinely be easier to move Crash and Cortex using the power of your mind, because trying to do it with the controller is a task even Hercules would think twice about accepting. Also, forget any evil birds, the greatest enemy here is the dreaded camera, as the wretched thing never goes where it needs to and constantly gets in the way of any sort of fluid gameplay. The music, usually a highlight of Crash games, is tinny and irritating, and the draw distance is so bad you'd be lucky if you got to move more than an inch without being blinded by Poppin. Some critics did praise its level variety and the introduction of new character Nina Cortex, but sadly, Twinsanity wasn't so much twice as nice as it was double trouble. Peter?
Number 16. Crash Bandicoot Nitro Kart 2, 2010, mobile. The first Crash game to carry the Nitro Kart subtitle was a full-on release for the Game Boy Advance, which we'll get to in a bit, but its sequel was, weirdly, only released as a mobile title. Nitro Kart 2 came out in 2010 exclusively on iOS, meaning you needed an iPhone or an iPod Touch in order to get in on the fun. There are 10 playable races, although only Crash and Cortex can be played at the start of the game, and there are 12 different tracks to choose from, which doesn't sound like much in this day and age, but for a mobile game back in 2010, this was basically witchcraft. 2 different control schemes are available, one which uses the touchscreen to guide racers, and another that involves tilting your device from side to side whilst everyone gives you funny looks on the bus. Cups, challenges, and a plot involving an alien who wants to turn the world into a big car park are all here for players to get stuck into, making for quite the complete package by mobile game standards, again especially in 2010. There's even a multiplayer mode, so players and their pals can look weird on public transport together. As much as we've lavished praise on Nitro Kart 2, however, it is still a mobile game, which means it's always going to be missing something when compared to large larger scale projects. Even within the realm of phone-based races, Nitro Kart 2 is nothing new. It's very competent, yes, but it was never going to blow anybody's socks off. Poorly designed rubber banding also meant that enemies had a nasty habit of overtaking players right near the end, which is never a fun time. Nitro Kart 2 did a fairly decent job for what it was, but as you'll find out in due course, it's not even the best mobile racer in the Crash series. Number 15. Crash Bandicoot Mutant Island, 2009, mobile. Keeping with the mobile theme for now, let's go to another game made for phones, and one that sounds like it should be a crossover with the X-Men or something. It isn't, I'm afraid, but I would like to let Activision know, if they're listening, that I would pay an obscene amount of money to watch Coco go head-to-head with Wolverine. Mutant Island begins like practically every game in the series. Crash is taking a nap. Brilliant. He then learns his sister Coco has been kidnapped by Neo Cortex, and he goes off to rescue her. Only this time, Cortex has a big robot on his side. Ho-ho! Maybe this time he'll actually win! Probably not, but, maybe. Vivendi Games Mobile did an amazing job condensing the full Crash Bandicoot experience into a bite-sized package here, as our hero's journey takes him to many different locations, including lush jungles, icy tundras, and rocky wastelands. The gameplay is more than just running and jumping too, as Crash can take control of the massive titans that roam the world, leading to all sorts of rompy-stompy fun. It's not all hunky-dory though, as the story takes rather a long time to get interesting, and alright, it's a Crash Bandicoot game, it doesn't need a really interesting story, but even then, some of the platforming levels feel remarkably samey. There's also that one killer detail from the previous entry, which is that even the best mobile titles are only ever going to be lesser experiences when compared to a decent full game. And with your main playthrough lasting just 2.5 hours with nothing else to do, Mutant Island wouldn't even get you through a medium-sized car journey. In spite of everything it does right, which also includes superb controls and gorgeous graphics for the platform, Mutant Island will just have to settle for being in the B team. It can be the captain of the B team if it wants to, but have you seen the rest of the squad? Ugh, they don't stand a chance. Number 14. Crash Nitro Kart, 2002, PS2, Xbox, and GameCube. In this kart racer from 2002, Crash Bandicoot took to the roads for only the second occasion in the series' history. Well, excluding the bit in Crash 3 where you get to drive a motorbike, but that's by the by. And this time, he got a little help from his friend dinitrogen monoxide. And for anyone listening who's not a chemistry teacher or laughing gas abuser, that's just another name for nitrous oxide. Players who chose to experience Crash Nitro Kart on home consoles ultimately ended up with a lesser version of the game, but it was by no means a bad one. The plot is absolutely bananas for a kart racer. A group of characters get abducted by a villainous alien emperor who forces them to take part in races for his entertainment. And if they refuse, then he will destroy the Earth and everyone on it. Oh, blimey, that got serious pretty quickly. I just wanted to play a fun racing game with my friends, but now the fate of the entire world is at stake. To be fair, this was just one of the game modes available, as players could also complete time trials, take part in a variety of battles, or just race for fun. Most of the action is quite standard fare for the genre, different tracks, various power-ups, boost pads, etc., and players could take control of up to 27 different characters, including all your favourites, like, I have no idea who this is. The main problem with Nitro Kart is that it doesn't feel that much different to what had come before it. Reviewers were understandably expecting some new additions after 4 years of waiting, but there were barely any to talk about, which was a bit of a letdown to say the least. That being said, a good kart racer is still a good kart racer, and this one had a fabulous control scheme that rewarded players of all skill sets, graphics that were top tier for the period, and plenty of different environments to explore. A nice time then, even if losing does mean the end of the world as we know it. Good luck everyone. Number 13. Crash of the Titans, 2007, mobile. But you've already talked about Crash of the Titans, Peter. You're wasting my time and I want my money back. Right, firstly, you haven't paid any money, although you can support us on the Worst Games Ever Patreon if you like. And secondly, this is a different version of the game we already mentioned, so shove that up your fruit bazooka. Whoa! In the same year it stank up the console community, Crash of the Titans also made an appearance in mobile form, though the similarities between the two titles are few and far between, and perhaps that's not such a bad thing. The game we're talking about here is in 2D, for example, and plops the beat-em-up portions of the original into a side-scrolling format. There is some platforming, with Crash needing to jump over chasms, or chasms if you prefer, and destroy obstacles from time to time, but most of the action is about smacking people in the face. He's even got boxing gloves on, so he doesn't hurt his little paws. Aw, isn't that precious? The similarities behind the big boy and little boy builds lie in their plots, as both revolve around Cortex harnessing the power of mojo to transform Wumpa Island's inhabitants into monstrous titans, and Crash can still control these beasts in the mobile version, riding atop them and piloting them around like an extremely violent version of Ratatouille. Whilst the obvious mobile game complaints were thrown its way, too short, overly simple, poor sound design and so on, Crash of the Titans did come in for some complimentary reviews too. The jacking mechanic transferred over quite nicely onto much less powerful devices and added some variety to the levels, and the graphics were pretty detailed in a way that was pretty impressive for a 2007 mobile title. Unfortunately though, this game did mostly come down to just punching random enemies and riding around on giant monsters, which is fun and all, but not something I want to do forever. Still, give the game its dues, there's no sign of Crash's tribal tattoos here. Now that I love to see. Number 12. Crash Bandicoot Nitro Kart 3D, 2008, mobile. For the best Crash experience you can play whilst on a train, in the back of a taxi, or sitting on the loo, you need look no further than this gem of a mobile game from 2008, Nitro Kart 3D. This time, an evil alliance of the Bandicoot's greatest foes have joined forces to launch a racing tournament in order to crown the King of Kart Racing for all eternity. As for the losers, they'll be banished from Insanity Island forever, which isn't great, but at least the whole of existence isn't under threat this time. With 6 different characters to play as, or 8 if you have an iOS device, 12 different stages to explore, and a whole bunch of weapons for you to murder your fellow drivers with, Nitro Kart 3D offers plenty of variety, but it's the control scheme that's really worth talking about. In a genre populated with some of the wildest and most unwieldy driving controls in history, these ones were smooth, easy to pick up, and actually made players feel like they had full power over their vehicle. The visuals were decent too, much better than anyone expected them to be, with the characters and landscapes looking much more similar to their console counterparts than one might have thought possible. Unfortunately though, this did allow players to notice that all of the tracks were almost carbon copies of those from Tag Team Racing, which was a shame, but didn't detract too much from the overall experience, especially if you hadn't played Tag Team Racing. Now, as I keep saying, a mobile game is just a mobile game at the end of the day, but this one did go above and beyond to prove that Crash had a place on people's phones. Slick, well-designed, and above all else, fun, Nitro Kart 3D is, as we've seen by the rankings on this list, a damn sight better than several larger Crash racing projects, despite being a fraction of the cost. Number 11. Crash of the Titans, 2007, DS. For the third and final time in this list, we're now discussing a game called Crash of the Titans, and I'd just like to congratulate both of us for not slipping up and calling it Clash of the Titans once during this whole video. No, please hold your applause. There's a very good reason why the DS release of Crash of the Titans ranks way higher than its console equivalent. It's essentially a completely different game. great news. Cortex still turns the island's inhabitants into big angry beasts, but this time our valiant fluffball is out to rescue Aku Aku instead of Coco, as he's been kidnapped in order to provide the magical mojo needed for the evil plot. Titan's DS does maintain some of the beat-em-up elements from the other games, but it has a much larger focus on platforming, with levels designed to reflect that fact. As you'd expect, touch controls play a big part in the action, whilst the hardware's inbuilt microphone can also be used to command the Titans you control to unleash a special attack. Mercifully though, there were other ways of doing this, so the game could be completed without yelling at the top of your voice in public. I wish I'd known that though, I'm still not allowed on the 103X bus to get into town. Nobody was calling this the game of the century or anything when it came out, but they were certainly far more impressed with it than the other versions. Some of that Crash magic from the older games felt like it was back in the form of the varied and entertaining levels that required multiple techniques in order to complete, but the jacking mechanic still offered a lot of opportunity for mindless destruction, which is no bad thing, we just don't want a Crash Bandicoot game that's filled with it, you know? That being said, there were still those who felt that mindlessly destroying enemies in a Crash Bandicoot game to any extent was still a bit dull, and that the environments weren't as exciting as on console. But on the whole, Crash of the Titans for the DS was far and above the best way to enjoy the game. In fact, because the console version is so bad, this is in fact the only way to use the word enjoy in the same sentence as Clash of the Titans. Oh, goddammit! Number 10. Crash Bandicoot 2 N-Tranced, 2003, Game Boy Advance. Don't be fooled by the number 2 in this game's title, it's actually game number 8 overall for Mr. CB. And of course it's also the second game to be called Crash Bandicoot 2, which I advise you not to think about for too long or else blood might shoot out of your ears from the stressful maths. The game, which is the second Crash title for the Game Boy Advance, hence the confusing name, pits the sneaker-loving furry lad up against his greatest enemies yet, his own friends. When Dr. Entropy and his new assistant N-Trance hypnotize Coco, Crunch and Fake Crash to work for them, Crash must make a difficult decision about whether or not to fight his own family. In terms of what players actually do in the game, it's incredibly simple, as levels consist of running from side to side, defeating enemies and collecting crystals to advance to the next stage. Adventurers begin with a small number of abilities, but are able to expand their moveset to include more powerful jumps and attacks by defeating the bosses at the end of each level. Now, as you might have guessed from what I've just described, N-Tranced is a little basic, but basic doesn't always mean bad. The game set out to achieve a very rudimentary goal, and that's precisely what it did, delivering an enjoyable platforming experience by not wasting time on anything too fancy. Now, this approach is not for everyone. The more negative reviews singled out the game's lack of innovation and low difficulty level, but for those looking to just jump in and have a good Crash Bandicoot time on the Game Boy Advance, we think N-Tranced really did hit all the right notes. Number 9. Crash Nitro Kart, 2003, Game Boy Advance. Once again here, we have a case of a game being much better on a handheld than it is on a more powerful bit of kit. Crash Nitro Kart for the Game Boy Advance released on the same day as it did for PS2, Xbox and GameCube, and it was this version that ended up being ported to the ill-fated Nokia N-Gage. Oh dear. On the GBA, players still have to navigate the more than mild peril that is the plot of this game. You know, the one involving a devious alien overlord who's going to destroy the entire planet if a group of cartoon characters don't drive around in little cars for him. You remember. After completing all the challenges set by this nasty customer, the final hurdle is of course to race him head-to-head, which must feel extremely cathartic. Car-fartic, maybe, because it's a racing game? No, never mind. It wasn't all sunshine and rainbows for Nitro Kart though, as players complained of patchy graphics and of certain parts of certain tracks that slowed their karts down for no particular reason. Other than those things though, it was pretty smooth sailing, as the game got rave reviews for its deep roster of characters and the integration of platforming elements outside of regular races. That's pretty cool. Now, as Nitro Kart released in the same year as a Mario Kart Kart game, Double Dash, there were always going to be comparisons made between the two, but whilst the plumber did get higher review scores overall, some outlets did actually give Crash the better rating, claiming that there was a lot more to his gameplay than that of the guy in blue overalls. Hey, a win is a win. Let the Bandicoot have this one, Mario.
Hey, plumber boy, mustache man, your worst nightmare has arrived.
Number 8. Crash Bandicoot The Huge Adventure, 2002, Game Boy Advance. Some games have really grandiose titles, don't they, like Shadow of the Colossus, or Ultima 4, Quest of the Avatar, or Knack. Now this is fine and all, but sometimes you want a subtitle that just says what the game is going to be and nothing else. Therefore, I give you Crash Bandicoot The Huge Adventure. Now that's what I'm talking about. This was the first time ever that players could take Crash with them when they left the house, it being the Bandicoot's debut on handheld, the Game Boy Advance to be precise. Ironically though, considering the title, this adventure actually takes place on a microscopic level, as Crash must reverse the effects of Cortex's planet-shrinking ray to return the Earth and everyone on it back to normal size. Sadly, there was never a sequel called The Really Tiny Adventure where all the characters were absolutely massive. That would have been fun, and pleased some pretty weird people from DeviantArt as well, I'm sure. Much like its sequel, N-Tranced, the objective of Huge Adventure is to scoot around levels and collect a series of crystals which will help regrow the Earth. Somehow. There are 5 stages to each level and a boss at the end that must be conquered in order to progress, and players can go back into levels that they've already completed and finish a time trial mode to gain extra rewards. For a handheld debut, this game did a really nice job, retaining much of the fun of Crash's earlier outings, whilst successfully introducing new enemy designs, terrains, and story beats. Furthermore, critics were blown away by the way Vicarious Visions have been able to transfer over the visuals onto a smaller gadget, and whilst the gameplay wasn't quite as exciting as other offerings for the GBA, mainly Mario and Donkey Kong, no Crash fan would have been embarrassed to be seen playing this, which would definitely not be the case for future Game Boy Advance Crash titles. Number 7. Crash Bandicoot N-Sane Trilogy, 2017, PS4, Xbox One, Switch, and PC. 9 years after Mind Over Mutant effectively killed the character on console, Crash Bandicoot made his glorious return with a brand new game. Okay, that was a lie. It wasn't quite glorious, and it was actually a remake of a previous game. Okay, that was also a lie. It was actually a remake of 3 previous games. God, what a minefield. This was the N-Sane Trilogy, which was developed by Vicarious Visions after years of speculation that the big bad Bandicoot might one day get a facelift. And that's exactly what happened, as the company lovingly recreated games 1, 2, and 3 of the original PS1 trilogy with updated graphics, a sharper engine, and all the gaming trimmings that had become available in the 21 years since Crash had been born. 21 years? God, we're all old now, aren't we? Most of the trilogy was a like-for-like copy of what had come before. However, autosaves have been added to protect 21st century gamers from the perils of the 90s, time trials were available across all the games where they'd previously only been in the 3rd, and players could now complete most levels as Coco, because, as we all know, women unfortunately hadn't been invented when these games first released. Fans and critics alike were thrilled to have their beloved Affront to Nature back, and back in a game that was actually worth playing. Everything from the visuals to the audio to the gameplay was what original Crash players had been dreaming of for years, although points were lost because this was just a remake collection, and one whose realistic fur and strange lighting system already seems a bit dated, and whose slippery pill-shaped hitboxes caused all manner of trouble on levels like the High Road. But the most important thing this game did had nothing to do with how it looked or how it played. it brought Crash Bandicoot back into the mainstream for the first time in over a decade. It sold over 10 million copies, proving that people still had a fondness for the character after all these years, and laid the groundwork for the Crash games that have come out since then. So well done N-Tranced Trilogy, despite its flaws, because if it had been a total bust, it might have destroyed Crash forever. And that is not a world worth thinking about. Number 6. Crash Bandicoot, 1996, PlayStation. Let us take you back now to a strange and magical land called 1996 and tell you a story about a young mutant bandicoot in jorts and trainers, but no shirt, who would go on to become a superstar and change the face of gaming forever. Created by Naughty Dog to fill the need for a mascot for the original PlayStation, Crash Bandicoot was originally called Willy the Wombat, and I thank the sweet baby Jesus every single day that they decided not to go with that name. In his very first outing, players witnessed how Crash came to be, as part of an army of genetically altered animals created by Dr. Neo Cortex in order to take over the world. As Crash is about to be brainwashed by the Cortex Vortex and become the general of Cortex's army, he manages to sort of inadvertently escape the lab, leaving behind his girlfriend, Torna. So many traits still recognizable in the series today were introduced in this debut outing. The Wumpa fruit, the wooden crates, the wacky enemies, the wonderful Australian setting that somehow blends ancient temples with cartoony mad science, it's all here, and players immediately became attached to this weird little guy as he did his best to rescue his sweetheart. Despite its legendary status nowadays though, not everyone loved Crash when he first arrived. Reviewers noted the finicky controls, lack of exploration, and pretty brutal difficulty when going for 100% as major flaws. But you know what? Who cares? This is Crash freaking Bandicoot. This is one of the best-selling PlayStation games ever made. The game that established Naughty Dog as the juggernauts they are today. The one that set all kinds of trends and precedents for the modern 3D platformer, alongside, admittedly, Super Mario 64, and one that started a franchise that, in spite of a few bumps along the way, is still going strong. Also, difficult and slightly finicky or not, it's just bloody brilliant, as smile-inducing to modern-day adults as it was to wide-eyed 90s kids, with some of the most memorable levels, baddies, and music tracks of the era. In summary, yes, Crash Bandicoot 1 is pretty good. Number 5. Crash Bandicoot 4 It's About Time, 2020. PS4, PS5, Xbox One, Xbox Series, Nintendo Switch, and PC. Over 2 decades after the end of the original Crash trilogy, players finally got the chance to forget the existence of the wrath of Cortex onwards and continue the story down a different timeline when a quote-unquote 4th game was released in the year 2020. Yes, the post-original trilogy games had their moments, but on the whole, we do feel like this was a much better route to take. There's even a nod to the semi-retconning of the non-Naughty Dog games in one of the cutscenes.
How many times have you beaten this clown anyway? 3. Really? Only 3? Funny. Seemed like more.
Crash Bandicoot 4, which was actually either the 8th or 25th overall Crash game, depending on how you viewed things, was given the subtitle It's About Time, which was a 3-part reference to one of the game's key plot devices, how long the game had taken to come out, and a piece of marketing material for Crash Bandicoot Warped. That's nice. Whilst trying to escape from their weird time prison thing, Uka Uka rips a hole in the space-time continuum, allowing Neo Cortex and Entropy access to the multiverse, leaving the exhausted evil mask lying seemingly dead on the floor. Now, 2 evil scientists accessing a multiverse is what we call in the business very bad. If only there was a pair of happy-go-lucky mutants on hand to save us all. Oh wait, there is. With the help of the newly unveiled quantum masks, Crash and Coco are able to track the baddies across space and throughout time. The masks also come with the power to alter certain parts of levels, which can be used to solve platforming puzzles and defeat enemies. Alongside the titular hero and his sister, players also get to control several other avatars, including longtime but now reformed villain Dingodile, and an alternative version of Torna, marking her first appearance as a playable character in 14 years. Some found the difficulty to be far too much for a game aimed at children, even when going for an any % completion, but for the most part, players were overjoyed with the vast scope of the story, returning cast of beloved characters, new abilities, and the beautifully vibrant world that developers Toys for Bob had crafted, making the N-Sane Trilogy appear pretty hideous by comparison. It took a long time to get here, but boy was it worth it. Number 4. Crash Team Racing, 1999, PlayStation. In the wake of Crash's roaring success as a platforming mascot, Sony decided to follow Nintendo's lead and put him behind the wheel of a tiny racing car. Once again developed by Naughty Dog, Crash Team Racing took the series to new places for the very first time, and did so in style. When a nasty alien called nitrous oxide arrives and threatens to turn the Earth into a multi-story car park, the only way he can be stopped is if the planet's greatest racers can defeat him in a test of mechanical mastery. Apparently though, all the Formula 1 and rally drivers must have been washing their hair on this day though, because this incredibly important task instead fell to a bunch of weird animals and their even weirder friends, all of whom live on one tiny archipelago off the coast of Australia. If players got tired of saving the world by winning cups and defeating bosses though, they could kick back and relax with a simple versus race, time trial, or another of the game's 5 distinct modes. Of course, CTR was 7 years behind Mario in terms of a kart racing debut, so it needed a USP, and this came in the form of its immaculate control and drift system, which made skilled players feel like they were genuinely flying round the courses at top speed. Mario Kart might still be the dominant force in this genre, but CTR proved to be a legitimate challenger to the Mushroom Addict's crown. This was the slightly cooler alternative to Nintendo's squeaky clean presentation, with a bonkers story, nutty characters, and a driving style that made you feel like an actual god if you could master it. No sequel could ever top the brilliance this game provided us, even with all of the upgrades in the world. However, whilst no direct follow-on would get any better, there was one other racing title that we think just takes the top spot on the winner's podium. Number 3. Crash Team Racing Nitro Fueled, 2019, PS4, Xbox One, and Switch. After the runaway success of the N-Sane Trilogy, it was only a matter of time before another relic from Crash's past was dug up and given a fresh coat of paint. 2 years after his platforming days were revisited, the world was reminded of Crash's history with karts, with the release of Crash Team Racing Nitro Fueled. Like N-Sane, this game was also a remake of the original CTR, brought up to speed for a modern audience. Car joke. The cast of characters from the first game were dragged kicking and screaming into the 21st century, and they all scrubbed up very nicely despite the kart racing world looking very different to when they first revved up their engines. Karts could now be customised, which wasn't an option before, and 2 new adventure modes were added to supplement all the racing. Perhaps most memorably though, whilst the original only had 15 playable characters, Nitro Fueled had a mind-boggling 56, which included every single racer from all previous CTR games, some that had previously only been available as bosses, as well as various other familiar faces from across the franchise, and a few very, very special guest characters too. I'm obviously talking about Spyro, he's very special to me. Developer Beanox also did a tremendous job in bringing the feel of the old games into the present, adding enough new stuff without interfering with what made CTR so popular in the first place. Some players found the controls a bit too hard to master, which wasn't a new complaint for the series, and the fun was dampened somewhat by microtransactions and the seemingly endless online mode, which, while nice to have when you fancy a quick race, was also designed to be be rather all-consuming. Please don't make me compete in any more Grand Prix, I want to get some sleep. Even with all of this working against it though, Nitro Fueled is still an elite level racer that took over the world when it was released, delighting longtime fans of the Bandicoot and newcomers alike. Please just don't tell Don Mario we said nice things about his competition. He knows where I live, he plumbed in my bathroom last year. Number 2, Crash Bandicoot 2, Cortex Strikes Back, 1997, PlayStation. Even though the dastardly Neo Cortex was defeated at the end of the first Crash game, like unwanted in-laws at Christmas, there's just no keeping him away. Released 1 year after the marsupial took the PlayStation by storm, Crash returned for a second adventure subtitled Cortex Strikes Back, which kinda sounds like he's gonna end this game frozen in carbonite, so thoughts and prayers for him, I guess. Using his evil charm, or perhaps just taking advantage of the fact that Crash is a bit of a dum-dum, Cortex tricks the naive little idiot into thinking he's changed his ways, and recruits him to collect several super-powered crystals that he actually plans to use to power a massive weapon on his orbital space station. Like its predecessor, Cortex Strikes Back is a platformer through and through, with a focus on navigating tricky levels, collecting Wumpas, and jumping on top of various wrong'uns. Its gameplay is largely unchanged from what came before, with a few exceptions, such as a greater reliance on crate-based puzzles and an improved difficulty balance across the levels. In fact, an entirely new dynamic difficulty feature was added under the hood, which tracked players' progress and made levels easier or harder depending on how they performed. For example, the boulder might roll a bit slower if you're a bit of a noob. I of course wouldn't know, because my game was always on the highest setting. Alright, fine, I cried the whole way through. Happy now? Ultimately though, Crash 2 didn't need to change much about the gameplay. That was practically perfect already. Instead, Naughty Dog spent time improving things like the visuals and animations, the sound, enemy design, and scripting. All of these little tweaks, as well as new ways to play, like riding a jet board or a slightly troublesome jet pack, added up to a whole load of fun, and critics and players went absolutely loco for this second installment. It's just a shame about the terrible final boss fight, isn't it? This was the best-selling of the 3 original Crash games and the 7th best-selling PlayStation game overall, and we don't deny that Cortex Strikes Back is a masterpiece, but just 1 year later, Naughty Dog outdid themselves once again.
Number 1. Crash Bandicoot Warped, 1998, PlayStation. Whilst an ancient proverb outlines that first the worst, second the best, in the case of Crash, it's actually his third outing that was the most dazzling. It still had a hairy chest though, but only because all Crash games do by default. Crash Bandicoot Warped, the final game in the original trilogy and the last mainline installment to be developed by Naughty Dog, dropped in 1998 and continued the series' PlayStation exclusivity.
The plot picks up immediately after the events of the previous game, as by destroying Cortex's evil space station in the 100% ending, the heroes accidentally unleash the evil mask Uka Uka when the station smashes open his underground temple prison, which is what you might refer to as a giant whoopsie. With Dr. N-Tranced by his side, Uka Uka and Cortex send themselves and their minions back and forwards in time to recover a set of magical crystals and gems, and it's up to the gang to follow them across the space-time continuum and prevent them from securing their powers. In order to achieve their lofty ambitions for the game, Naughty Dog designed 3 entirely new engines for Warped to help cope with the new jet skiing, motorcycling, and flying levels. Great care was taken to make the vehicular levels enjoyable, and while there might have been too many of them, I do think it's fair to say that they all play pretty well. Also, and our writer included this fact, not me, through a secret cheat code, players could meet a brand new PlayStation mascot in a playable demo. A little purple dragon named Spyro.
All of this hard work led to rave reviews from almost everyone who played this game. The razor-sharp gameplay, the engrossing storyline, the beautiful graphics, the stunning score, it was all brilliant and a nigh-on perfect ending to such an important gaming trilogy.
Warped also went down a treat commercially, becoming the first non-Japanese PlayStation game to sell 1 million copies in the country, and shifting over 7 million units in total. A triumph of platforming and gaming in general. Don't get it warped. Crash 3 is every bit as good as they say it is.